Okay, hello, welcome everybody. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. I am Kelsey Woodworth, the Content Marketing Manager for GiveSmart. And we have heard from so many of you and so many of our school partners over the last month or so with concerns over what to do next with their fundraising, given this new normal that we are all finding ourselves in. So today, as we discuss implementing recurring giving strategies, we just want to touch on all of this. We've specifically had a lot of requests come through about how to shift fundraising from in-person to online, different ways that your organization can secure revenue. So that's why this week we want to talk about different ways that you can implement these strategies and what goes along with that, in person compared to virtual and both. So today, joining me are my colleagues, Eric Anderson, and he has managed hundreds of events, his team under him as well, thousands of fundraising events and campaigns in the last 7 or so years. So no doubt he's bringing us a solid look at what's happening in the industry and a lot of knowledge there. Ian Flanagan, who drives innovation here at GiveSmart, and has his eye on the future of fundraising. He actually led the research efforts around recurring giving here at GiveSmart as we added that as a feature recently. And specifically, he led the testing and implementation with the Bridge Teen Center, which is an organization that we're going to be referencing today. You'll hear us mention that. And lastly, we have Brandon Steck, who brings years of experience from the philanthropic and sports side of the industry, combined with his love for data and insights based around what we see our clients do here at GiveSmart, and he is the head of our marketing team. So we anticipate going about 35 minutes today, and then I've asked the guys to stay on for another 15 minutes for Q&A. So please do submit your questions throughout. The chat is open. You can select the right-hand panel in the question box, and we will get to them at the end. And lastly, if you are inclined, we're going to be live tweeting, so feel free to follow along with us at GiveSmart PowerUp. So before we begin, we just want to launch into a quick poll to kind of see where everyone is at. So for those of you on the call, please weigh in. Are you donation or donation received? Yes, or it could be more. Perhaps no, we need some more help, or we don't offer a recurring giving option. And while everybody weighs in, Ian, if you could just give us, because like I said, we're going to be referencing the Bridge Teen Center today, could you give us a little bit of background on them?
Hi, Kelsey. Yeah, I'd be happy to. So the Bridge Teen Center is an organization outside of Chicago. We started talking to them early last year when we began to explore this feature. Initially, and sort of like many of the features that we add to GiveSmart, it came about feedback from customers who are out there running events and fundraising. Their desire was to solicit recurring donations when enthusiasm was at its peak among their donors, specifically around their signature event in the spring. And so what we did was we sort of sat down, tried to understand sort of how they envision this feature working. We worked with them throughout development so that as we were deploying updates and beta testing with them, we're kind of in constant contact with them and iterating on the feature. And so it's been sort of out in the wild now for about a year. We've got a lot of great feedback from them. I know they couldn't join today to discuss this with us, but I do just want to say a huge thanks to Rob and Amber at the Bridge Teen Center for all of the help over the past year. So we're pretty excited with the features now. We've gotten a lot of great feedback. So we're really keen to see what other customers can start to do with it.
Yeah, amazing. And also thank you to Ian and Brandon and Eric for joining us today. I realize this kind of like rolled through, didn't even give them a chance to say hey, but we'll be hearing from all of them shortly. So if we could go ahead, let's launch and see the poll results. Okay, so it looks like it's kind of split mostly between it could be more and needing some help. So Eric, are you surprised by what we're seeing in this poll?
Definitely not surprised. And hello, everybody. Nice to thanks for having me on the webinar, Kelsey. So it seems like the most popular choice here was it could be more, and I think that matches what we're hearing from all the organizations we work with, which is that we understand that this is an area that's kind of seen as like untapped potential for a lot of organizations. There's a lot of focus, especially on our end, about fundraising at a specific event or a specific campaign. But we're increasingly excited about looking for opportunities to engage your donors year round, and I feel like everyone always feels like there's more opportunity to increase their engagement there.
Yeah, totally. Okay, cool. So today what we're going to cover is, this PowerPoint going to let me keep going. So the three main things we're going to get through today are, ways that your organization can encourage and secure more recurring donations, more funds, and how that leads to higher retention, as well as how recurring, promoting a recurring giving campaign and how that might be separate than some of your other initiatives that your organization is running. And so in this first section, in encouraging and securing more recurring donations, we're going to touch on the psychology of giving, various enrollment opportunities, perks and benefits that can be given to your supporters, and ways to capitalize on support that you might already be receiving. So Eric, over to you.
Yeah, so if we're going to talk about the psychology of giving, we could very easily schedule a weekly webinar on this topic every week for the rest of the year, and probably still not have tapped everything we can get into. So this webinar is definitely not meant to be a comprehensive overview of philanthropic strategy and psychology of giving, but I think it's helpful to start with a little bit of a fundamental here, just because it informs everything else that we're going to talk about. And just FYI, we're going to send some suggested readings in the follow-up email, just in case anybody's interested, has a little extra time to read through some interesting materials. So we'll talk on a couple main points that I think it's important to bear in mind as you're considering recurring giving. As with all things, I would encourage you to keep all of your strategies focused on just the fundamentals. It's all about engagement. The most important thing is, how do you capture a donor's attention? And then once you have the donor's attention, how do you make that connection between the act of donating and how it impacts your mission? So I think one helpful way to think of it, one way to frame the process is to donors to think of it as a buying decision, a purchase decision. So if you tie the donation size to the supplies or the impact, it presents the appeal as a sort of buying decision. And we make buying decisions every day in our lives. It makes it a more familiar process for somebody. So rather than just thinking of it as, I'm going to donate money to support ABC Foundation, you actually want your donor to think of it as, I'm going to donate this amount of money because I am purchasing this impact on the mission. And it's a pretty basic thing, but it's something that can often go overlooked. And so we think it's important that as you're launching your recurring giving, we'll look for opportunities to frame it that way. Anything you can do to draw a through line between the monthly gift and then what its impact is, really helps kind of motivate somebody to actually engage and perform the action of signing up for monthly giving. And then as you're doing that as well, it's really important to make every donor and every contribution feel valuable. You don't want somebody to feel discouraged from making a $5 monthly gift because they feel like it's not going to have an impact. You really want to make sure that somebody feels like they are powerfully impacting what you are trying to raise money for, whether it's a large gift or a small gift. Second thing to bear in mind here is just the power of peer influence. We all know that people will often look to see who else is supporting your organization. So I think one of the mantras here is recognition is key. The more you can recognize who your donors are and who your community is, it helps people feel like they're a part of that community. So we encourage you to think about ways that you can connect your networks. Use your various channels and social media and whatnot to just highlight the community that you have and encourage supporters to do more, to invite their friends. Look for opportunities to integrate that messaging on your recurring giving pages. So I think just boiling that all down, try to treat the act of donating as a buying decision, and then just bear in mind the importance of peer influence on a donor. So on this next slide here, a couple basic words here, some really powerful adjectives. I think an important bit of psychology that I wanted to touch on is just the power of language. There's a couple studies that talk about this, and there's one that I read where there's 9 adjectives that English speakers use to describe a moral person: kind, caring, compassionate, helpful, friendly, fair, hardworking, generous, and honest. So this might seem basic, but these are adjectives to strongly consider integrating into any of your emails, your invites, your donation pages, really anything that's getting into the eyeballs of your donors. It can have a dramatic impact on what the donor's behavior is going to be. There's a study that found that using these adjectives versus omitting them actually increased charitable giving by 10%. So it's really important to consider just how language can impact your donor's behavior. An example here would be saying, we'd like to thank our loyal supporters over the last year. Your generous donations have supported 40 missions that led to 275 animals being rescued. And this isn't meant to be a comprehensive list. Don't limit yourself to these 9 descriptors, but this will hopefully give you a jumping off point.
Yeah, definitely. That's really insightful, Eric. Thank you for that. And I think definitely worth keeping in mind. So the next kind of topic is getting in people actually enrolled. So Brandon, over to you on that.
Yeah, and we've got a pretty cool example that we're showing here. Another way to encourage and secure recurring donations is to be direct. Ask people to sign up for it. It doesn't need to be subtle and hidden. It should be something that you ask for because it is a unique way they can support you. Oftentimes it's overshadowed by the organizations asking for that one-time donation. Well, in reality, you might actually end up raising more through that one person through monthly giving or recurring giving. So encourage your audience to become supporters. Use that in your communications out. You can see here a text message was sent specifically about making a monthly donation, and that's an important element of using technology or whatever way you're using to collect it, is to communicate out that this is an option so people feel like they can support. Another way is these recurring giving enrollment offers can also happen at your signature event during a pivotal time of year. For instance, a literacy foundation may want to run a campaign for monthly giving that starts in April, which is National Poetry Month, which I learned the other day. Or run a campaign solely just to get new people involved on a monthly basis, on a quarterly basis, however you set that up. It allows them to become a part of your ecosystem and become someone who is giving towards your cause. And I think Ian has a really cool example of how Bridge Teen Center did this.
Yeah, thanks, Brandon. And as we were talking about this feature with Bridge Teen Center, they were very keen to get it up and running in time for their spring gala, which was their signature event of the year. The reason for this, and what I sort of mentioned at the top, is that this was, when they had all their donors in the room, excitement for the mission was high. They could really demonstrate to donors the impact that their, fundraising was having for the organization. But crucially, and to be fair, this is something I learned as well as I was working with them. They were really able to demonstrate the impact of kind of stable monthly giving on their budget throughout the year. And so this is something that was a little new to me. It was certainly information that would be new to their donors. But sort of having a steady stream of recurring donations sort of affected them positively in a few ways. It had sort of a direct impact on their ability to plan projects for their constituents and the folks who use their services. They could sort of more accurately forecast and budget how much money would be coming in via their recurring donations, and then plan projects that way. Like I said, it gave them some stability in budgeting. The other sort of nice benefit of this was that not only could they sort of recognize their donors at their signature event, but they could give sort of special attention to donors who gave recurring throughout the year. I know this is something that Eric touched on a little bit too, but in sort of highlighting the impact that recurring donors had on the mission throughout the year, it sort of really shed a light on folks who kind of had an impact to the mission, even when the focus wasn't on them. So even when we're 4 months, 6 months, 8 months out of a really signature event or an opportunity to recognize donors, when everybody got back together for the springtime event, they could really highlight the cumulative impact that the donations had throughout the year. And so I think there's a lot of energy around live appeal moments, sort of direct asks for money. But I think there was also sort of a particular satisfaction they took in being able to sort of highlight the donors who had, stayed with them throughout the year, who had persisted, and then recognize them all at once. Because that's not something you can just do sort of in one night. That takes, 12 months of giving to sort of be within that group. So I thought that was a really interesting way that they highlighted it. And their second springtime event sort of just ran now. at the beginning of March, before it sort of, things happened in the world. But that was a really nice way where they could say, listen, we launched this initiative last year. We saw sort of a huge impact from it. These are the folks that stuck with us. Now's your chance to, join this group of folks and sort of, commit to a monthly gift, for the upcoming year.
Yeah, and I think them kind of like building on the excitement of that moment, like that live ask, is a really good idea to take that opportunity. So, Eric, I know
if I could just add to that.
Yeah.
Let me just add to that, because I think there's an important thing that I get really excited to hear about is we're all going through what we have right now, this pandemic, is securing and protecting your budget and knowing that you have at least in a minimum amount coming in every month. And Ian pointed that out, and that was obviously an element of what really excited the Bridge Teen Center. That allows you to plan. You know how much you can put towards rent that's just coming in, monthly donations, and you can protect that and really, ensure that you're going to have that relationship longer standing, because people aren't having to dig in their pocket for something new. They've already committed to make that donation. And, just like, joining a gym, you make that commitment, you get excited about it early, but it's always there. Just like I've been paying for Netflix for however long, but I may not use it in an entire month. Obviously right now I am, but just that I wanted to point that out. I think that's really an exciting piece of what Ian said there. And that quote really resonates of protecting your budget.
Yeah, totally. And so the last kind of way in terms of encouraging and securing more donations, Eric, can you speak to the VIP experience as we've been calling it?
Yeah, absolutely. And just as a way of piggybacking on the last idea as well, I mean, I think one of the things that I think is really powerful about this topic is, with all the challenges that organizations are facing with the COVID-19 pandemic and having to pivot from in-person events, is that it's important to bear in mind that there are opportunities to embrace here. And as you're either pivoting to virtual or having some online campaigns or considering recurring giving, it's giving your donors more of a chance to consider that aspect of their relationship with you, where if there's a donor who typically engages with you at an event, now there's the opportunity to get them to engage with you on a monthly basis. And so I think it's important to remember that there are exciting possibilities and opportunities there. But I think the last thing we'll talk about here on this topic is that if you're setting up recurring donations, it gives you an opportunity to set up like VIP or membership style experiences for donors. You can have certain perks that are given to those donors who are providing you with monthly gifts. And the opportunities here are really endless. But what we've commonly seen is having a VIP reception at your next event, and maybe the invite list for that VIP reception are the monthly donors. You want to give swag to them. The classic example is the NPR tote bag. You can have private workshops or access to resources within your organization. There's a nonprofit that I donate to monthly that they promote talks and meetups for their monthly donors, which is really exciting. I think for the foreseeable future, you're looking at virtual meetups and virtual talks. But what's cool about that is it's really like the gift that keeps on giving. It's a really good way of fostering community and creating even more opportunities for engagement and donor loyalty and things like that. So I think it's important not just to leave the monthly gift at a monthly gift, but there's opportunities to continue engaging them from that.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so now we're going to move into why recurring giving drives more funds and higher retention rates. So is this just something we want to set it and forget it, Brandon?
Well, we got really excited when we had this meme added to the presentation, but it is very, very similar to a set it and forget it in the donor's case, where they can set it up, they can move on. They know that amount's coming out every month, and there's low barriers to entry because it's a lower amount, but it's also something that is easier for the donors to commit to and then move on. It's easy enough for you as well, because that's coming in, that person's set up, and then you set up your retention as you go and keep them engaged in many different ways. This increases the retention rate because they're giving more than once, We find that donors on average give 1 to 4 times per year. We had a research study last year that acknowledged that the people are looking to give to the same organization even several times throughout the year, and they will do so in many different ways. This is a way that you're at least capturing a little bit more. But you don't want to forget about them. You should recognize them and find a way to thank them, congratulate them on a milestone maybe, and treat it as something that is congratulatory and thankful, but also a touch point reminder that, hey, we're here, here's the difference you're making. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. As a campaign, recurring giving does have a very low barrier to entry. It's a lower cost, it's lower pressure. Think about it as a special at the gym. $10 a month to join is really not as much of an issue. And then as things go on, if you're not engaging with the gym, you're going to want to quit. It's much harder to quit the gym than it is to join. Same kind of concept. It is much more difficult for someone to take money away once they've already committed it to you than to sign up for something that's more. So more often than not, $10 a month will be more feasible for someone than maybe $100 a month. And then in the end, $10 a month in an annual schedule is $120. So you're already making a little bit more there. And it can feed right into your annual campaign. You can kick it off at the beginning of the year, but you can also launch it at any point throughout the year. Even though it's small, this does make a big difference for your organization because it adds up. I think Ian can touch on some examples, but what we've seen is organizations are raising in the thousands every month through monthly giving campaigns because they just have these people set up to go.
Yeah, that's correct. And as we sort of got into the weeds on some of the numbers from donors for the organizations who had enabled the recurring giving, some of it validated, some of our early assumptions. I think, not to get too sort of into the math about it, but I think we saw around sort of 2/3 of the donation amounts per month were kind of at or under $30, which is what you'd expect. Like you said, Brandon, the low barrier to entry. It's easy to just give $5 or $10 or $20. And frankly, I think I expected more of the sort of that amount per month. And even within that sort of 2/3 that were the lower dollar amounts, a lot of those were still, $20, $25 or $30. Interestingly, I think in sort of the data that we've seen so far, there still is a pretty significant percentage, I'd say somewhere between like 8 to 10 to 12% of donors who are giving monthly donations of $100 or more. Now, I'd caution you, take this with a grain of salt. Our data set is still growing. So the more we have a chance to study this and the more time that passes, we'll get, cleaner and cleaner numbers on it. But I think at first blush, some of these numbers are a little interesting, where, just like any signature event or fundraising moment, you'll have that percentage of donors who want to make a big impact, who want to make a big splash, and donate some really high numbers. So that's a trend we've seen continue within recurring giving, which is, something really interesting. It'll be fun to watch. I think the other interesting sort of note here is this type of giving model. We've seen sort of, in other fields, in other industries, to take, a more creative industry approach. There are other services out there who offer a similar type of crowdfunding model that sort of echoes recurring giving for nonprofits. An idea here is that, a musician, an artist, they may put up a Kickstarter to just, start raising money to get a project off the ground. Somebody else who is out there who's, producing content on a recurring basis, they may sort of, solicit, recurring donations, through Patreon or similar service like that, simply because, they're continually putting out content. The donations have a direct impact on what they're doing. I think that model sort of directly applies to the work we see most of, the clients' nonprofits doing, because these are donations that are having a direct impact on their projects and programs.
Cool. And then kind of sort of in relation to that and with what we're seeing, Brandon, if you could just walk us through this graph, I think was interesting with what we found with millennials.
Yeah, I wanted to quickly share this. This is from our fundraising event expectation study that we did in the fall of last year, and still very relevant as we look at some of the things going on. But it shows millennials are the demographic that more often than not want to give at a signature event. 44% of millennials want to make a donation at a signature event. That doesn't mean that, the Gen X and the Boomers and the other generations do not, but that's a trend that, as we look at the industry, is an opportunity. So while in-person events might be off the table at the moment, this is a reminder that really attracting the younger demographics for donations is key right now, as those people are in the, for lack of a better word, mood for giving. They are great for recurring giving because of the low barrier to entry. And then I think this is my favorite picture we have, but as we look at this visual, this really kind of puts it into perspective. On average, we see, just based off some research that we've been doing, a monthly recurring gift is going to be in the, right around $52 a month. And over a year, that's $624 annually. And as you look at that, how many of your donors are giving upwards of over $500 annually, that you could get to $624, and what can you do with another $124 per donor? That right there is a nice impact. The other piece of monthly giving programs, where donor retention rates may be below 50% for some organizations, some higher, just depends on your organization. Monthly giving retention rates usually around 80% in that first year. If you can get them to 5 years, it's 95% that they're going to retain. They're going to retain their donation because they're already in that behavior and they're really committed to it at that point. So keep that in mind as you're trying to talk to board and leadership on why this program is important, and find an easy way to implement it as well.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Definitely interesting numbers to kind of keep in mind as we move forward. And so the last kind of section is just going to be on promoting a recurring giving campaign, and definitely going to cover this in more ways than one. So over to you, Eric.
Thanks. So just like with any other fundraising campaign, you want to bear in mind the framework of what you're doing. The most important question with recurring giving is always, what is my goal? What do we want to achieve with the funds that will come in through recurring giving? Rather than just saying, hey, we're gonna put this feature on a website and ask people to give you $5 and we'll figure out what to do with it later. You really want the messaging around the entire campaign to be targeting the goal of what you're raising money for, and then how each donor can play into that vision. So I think it's helpful to break it down so that the donated dollars can be tied to a very visible outcome, and you want to be as specific as possible. This goes back to some of the psychology of giving pointers that we were giving at the outset of this call. So just one specific example to get your creativity going. We have a picture here of like a beautiful library. To me, this looks like the renovated library, but maybe we need to renovate it further, and it's going to cost $120,000. So I think probably if it were me, the most helpful way of messaging that to donors is to say, we want to have 1,000 people give $10 per month for a year. If you can kind of boil it down into one $10 monthly donation, how many donors it's going to take. If you're that person with $10 in your pocket to give, it's easier to see how your contribution can get you to the finish line. So always bear in mind what the goal is, and then translate that goal into what an individual donor can do to get there, so that everyone feels responsible for it.
Yeah, definitely. And so kind of continuing on with that, I know we touched on millennials before, that graph that we saw, but Brandon, how exactly, would that tie into something in these specific goals that you have set out?
Yeah, so as we mentioned before, there is a continuous uptick in millennials and even some Gen Z donors wanting to give more often, but also at that signature moment. And one way to make that bucket bigger is this monthly opportunity to make sure that there's as many people can give as possible. You can make it like a subscription. Just like they want to subscribe to a streaming service, they want to subscribe to Donate to You, and you can capitalize on social media and using video content to really share the story of the difference they're making. We do have some information that we've collected on what they're looking for in regards to follow-up. We have a research study on the different generations and how they want to be followed up with. And more often than not, the top thing is, what was their impact? So an impact story allows them to kind of subscribe to your mission. Just a few different ways to interact and how you should interact with millennials on social, but you want to tag your supporters. If they made a donation, tag them on social media with a quick thank you. And, thanks for launching your monthly campaign kind of thing. Rich media, use video, use different ways to display the story, and then continue to be active, continue to reply and engage, congratulate people, and that kind of thing. And finally here, as we all know, I love data. We're going to bring some data back to the table here. So this chart is, again, from the fundraising event expectation study that really applies well right now to what we're looking at of what millennials are looking for in regards to programming. And you can see not just millennials, but everyone. Our third item there, a segment devoted to celebrating the success of the organization, is the top item or second item in regards to Gen X, but it's really close. It's only 5%. But that's the top item they're looking for in their programming, is how they can celebrate the success. They want to cheer you on. They want to be a part of the mission. It's a big key point. And this way, this program can be themed behind that. You can put an entire monthly theme program around your celebrators, your millennials, your Gen X, your boomers, whatever age they are. Put some theme to it. Even just give it a name, and they're going to care. They're going to share it, and they're going to be excited to be a part of something like that. And then finally, I believe we have another slide here. Different kind of way to promote, but something we wanted to make sure people were aware of is incentivizing donors. So, you can incentivize donors for increasing their monthly contribution, perhaps every year, every other year. You touch base with them and encourage them to give more, but also relate it to what they're doing. So Eric mentioned earlier, relate it back to what the actual difference is. Last year we all helped us buy 5 books. This year, we really want to up that to 10 books, make it tangible so they understand that this is the difference they're making. The other way you can do that is incentivizing them to bring a friend, encourage a friend to enroll and tell them about the difference you're making. Social media obviously is a great way for that. And then incentivize your year-round donors or one-time donors or people who haven't given in a while of, hey, we really could use your donation. Join our monthly giving program, and we can make this difference. And it's a lot easier to join. Again, back to those barriers of entry, right? Someone who maybe hasn't given in a year, they might be falling on hard times right now. Invite them back in a softer way, an easier way to get them re-embedded in your community. All these options are a great way to capitalize on those who are already invested in supporting your cause. They're your biggest advocates. You can even bring in other older donors that maybe went to the wayside, and these flexible giving options allow them to support again. Ian, would you agree with most of that? All of it, maybe?
Yeah, definitely. And I think sort of 2 additional thoughts, just from what we've seen working with some of the folks who are running this already. The first is that though they emphasized it in the context of a signature event, the Bridge Teen Center didn't have a recurring donation option, through their website or through another service or anything like that. So we actually became their recurring giving option. So outside of their signature event, they could still set up and collect recurring donations from their website, just sort of redirected to a page. Interestingly, I think 15 to 20% of their current recurring donors came via their website, not an event. So that number is a little bit higher than I would have expected, but definitely encouraging. The second thought we had just working with them is they really started to view this kind of stream of recurring donations, as an aspect of their giving strategy that they want to grow. And so they see kind of the main tributaries to it being their big signature events. But I think they're also now exploring other ways that they can emphasize it throughout the year. At smaller events, more community-driven events, other giving campaigns. And so this kind of river of funds
that they're growing, has a couple of different, streams feeding into it at this point. Interestingly, from last year to this year, I think the sort of month-to-month amount has grown about 30% from where they started last year to where they are right now. So they had a really nice sort of kickoff, and then just sort of the year-over-year growth that they've seen has also been really encouraging so far.
Yeah. All right. Well, now I just want us to have some time to jump into Q&A. So we've been having questions come through the chat, which is really great. If you haven't already submitted one, feel free to do so. And so, cool. Let's get started. So I think let's see. The first question is going to be, I think, probably best, Eric, for you to answer. And the question is, if I have multiple campaigns, a gala in September and a golf tournament in June, is there any reason not to turn the feature on with each site that I have?
I would say no. There's no reason to hold off on promoting the opportunity for recurring giving on any of the campaign sites that you build. For those two examples that you listed, putting the opportunity to enroll there is sort of the entry point, and then going forward, you'd be able to report on and manage the incoming monthly donations from your org hub within GiveSmart. But yeah, I think as many entry points as you can give people, the better. I don't think that there's too many ways you can ask.
If I could just add to that, Eric, you're right. I can't think of a scenario where you wouldn't want to have this on, because it's the flexible giving scenario, right? If you think about everyone who's either coming to your gala or participating in another campaign, you want to make sure every dollar can be taken off the table there. And if there's even one person who takes advantage of recurring giving, that's money that you might not have gotten otherwise, especially as people are currently in a time where there might not be as much money on their table as there used to be. So keeping that in mind and really being conscious of, I need to be flexible, allows you to really have a bunch of really successful campaigns.
Cool. This next question I think could be, for anyone. How often do you thank your recurring donors? Each month, quarterly, annually?
Was that how often do you thank them?
Yeah, how often do you thank thank you?
When you look at, I'm going to use monthly donors as the example. You should look at milestones as the opportunity to thank them. So if you look at a full year, if someone giving, there's obviously a thankful moment there, but halfway through the year is probably another thankful moment. And even after their first month of, giving, that's probably the other trigger point. So if I signed up here in April as a donor to Kelsey's foundation, Kelsey would send me a thank you for that. And then when I reach my next milestone, say that, for her, it's when I reach my 6-month mark, there's a bigger thank you, maybe a video thank you, some kind of impact story of the difference I've made so far. And then it's really up to you, but I would then give that, some time over the next 6 months to still touch base with stories. But the next really big thank you is when you hit that year, because that's the retention point, and you don't want that person or me to fall into that small 20% of people that don't renew. You want to keep me around, and obviously using it as a milestone and being like, this is really a big deal for both of us, not just our organization, but you as part of our organization, is probably the framework I would use. But again, that's strictly in my opinion. Sometimes you need to fit it with what your org's goals are.
Yeah, I think Brandon really hit the key points there. But some thoughts that I had in addition were, I think it's almost always a good rule of thumb to always thank a donor for any gift, and to do it promptly, as close to immediately as you can. But to Brandon's points, I think you have to consider, the maybe like the different tiers of different gifts. And if you're sending them, a 1,000-page tome every time they make a monthly donation, it might be a little bit overwhelming. And it's also maybe discounting the value of those exciting milestones. The one additional milestone I would just throw in that list is when somebody does first enroll, I think it's an opportunity to immediately thank them, recognize them, and then also take that donor through a journey of your mission and say, thank you so much. This is the journey we have ahead. This is what we're raising funds towards. So I think that's first entry into monthly giving is an opportunity to, to educate and inspire them.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, this next question is for Brandon. Okay, so on a $200,000 campaign, which is monthly giving of $20 per person per month, how much would be lost to credit card fees and processing fees, roughly speaking?
The dream scenario in my mind would be that none was. If you use a software that allows you to pass the fees on and donors opt into that, so obviously there's that option out there, then you wouldn't have to worry as much. Doing the math on that, it depends on your vendor, it depends on what you're using, but I would hope, knock on wood, and my desk is made of wood, so I did knock on wood, it would be very minimal. I would set your goals slightly higher to cover it if you are not going to pass the fees on, but I highly recommend it. And I know our team, especially Ian, who's involved in the product, would say, pass the fees on, or at least give them the option to cover the fees. Every donation I've made where it's an option to cover the fees, I make that option. I cover that. That's minimal to me because I've already committed to a certain amount, and I want to make sure you're getting your full quote unquote money's worth when I make my investment in your organization. So that would be the hope. Certainly understand it's not always a scenario if you're not using the technology to support that, but definitely look into that as you're setting up a campaign, especially on a campaign of that size.
Yeah. All right, cool. The next question, do you recommend having a name for your monthly giving program? Does it matter, or should we just call it Join Our Monthly Giving Club?
I love this question. I saw this one on there and I was really excited about it. I would highly recommend giving it a name. When I worked in sports, I came up with all kinds of names for different seating areas in our stadiums, just for fun, to kind of have a little bit of a theme. It creates excitement, it creates camaraderie. Keep it appropriate, but definitely incorporate some kind of fun theme to that. And don't be afraid to throw a small event when we get back into events here, where you do a happy hour with your I'm trying to come up with a good name. I had one the other day. Your Purple People Eaters. You want to get all those people together so they can then re-encourage everyone to stay around. That kind of theme will resonate, and also allows those people to feel part of something that is a little bigger than their little donations they're making.
Yeah. Okay, and kind of, I guess this next question sort of goes off of that in terms of little donations. Question is, on our donation page, would you recommend using verbiage such as a lower monthly donation will go a long way, basically drawing their attention to the fact that they could donate less today, but have it be monthly, which is a lot to us?
I can take this. I think that language could be effective, but I think the important thing is and if you take a look at what the recurring giving looks like on our pages, we will typically have it set up with a series of pre-programmed amounts and then an other option. But I think the most important thing to bear in mind is translating what a given amount will translate to over the course of a year. So, if maybe you can just present the range of options and say, if it goes from $10 a month to $100 a month, you can say for $10 a month, you are funding X. For $100 a month, you are keeping a child in our school program, that kind of thing. So I think rather than, I think my first thought when I heard that was it almost feels like you're gearing them towards the lower amounts. But if you can present the value of all the different amounts, that's the best way of casting a wide net.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, the next question is for Ian. So Ian, through GiveSmart, can donors choose the end date for their recurring giving donation? So for example, can they opt to give $10 a month for 5 months?
Yeah, great question. So for right now through GiveSmart, the way that our recurring donations are set up is that they run monthly and they are sort of indefinite. If the donor needs to cancel, all they have to do is contact the org, and the org has the tools to do that. However, this is one of many improvements we see for the future with this feature. And so just because it's this way today doesn't mean it's going to be this way forever. We have sort of the usual backlog of improvements and feedback that we've been getting from the Bridge Team Center, but also other clients who have started to use it. And so for right now, the donations would run indefinitely, but the organization can manage them themselves.
Yeah, and I feel like that maybe is more the standard. Anyway, okay. The next question is for Brandon. Is a monthly email to highlight recurring giving too much? I don't want to potentially have donors opt out or unsubscribe from our future mailing.
So I'm assuming that's a promotional email of promoting the monthly giving program. I would say monthly might be a bit much, just depending on how frequently you are communicating otherwise. I would dedicate campaigns for monthly giving maybe to a more every other month, but incorporate it in your other messaging. Always make it available. So if you're talking about your upcoming golf tournament, definitely include the option to donate monthly, and include that in the communication of we do have monthly giving options, but it doesn't need to be the forefront of the messaging. For those that get emails from us, you know, we do send out a lot of emails when we have a lot of stuff going on, and I'm definitely the biggest for that. Probably everyone has gotten emails from me more often than they would expect. But the biggest thing with emailing is, you know, have something to talk about, which fortunately I believe that is the case whenever you're doing it, and then tie it back to an action that you're hoping to get. So if that action every month is to get a monthly donation from people, and you have a mission-oriented message to pass along, I would say go for it. But obviously be mindful of what you're sharing in that message beyond what the action is. So hopefully that answers the question, and you know, feel free to reach out to me if you want to talk a little bit further on that. Is a cadence with emails is definitely a science that you kind of perfect over time, and it's always changing, especially with rules these days.
Yeah. All right. So the next question, anyone could answer. What are some best practices to increase a donor's monthly gift?
Yeah, I'll jump in here. I think a couple of things to bear in mind are, you know, we've really harped on it in this call, but I think if you can illustrate what an increased contribution will do in impacting your mission, I think it's, you know, if you're treating it as like a buying decision, you know, somebody's already opted into, you know, buying $10 a month worth of impact for your organization, and if you can, you know, target those donors that are already giving you that amount and say, for this amount more, you can maximize your impact. We can get to this next milestone in our mission. So I think just continuing to translate that into what an individual donor can do to impact what the organization can actually accomplish. Trying to, you know, paint that vivid picture, focus on the goal, translate, you know, the fundraising towards what your mission is. I think just, you know, kind of showing what the difference is, you know, the delta between, you know, a $20 a month gift and a $10 a month gift, you know, what that difference actually would enable the organization to accomplish. Then the donor is able to make a purchasing decision and say, you know, is that something that I want to buy into the world?
Yeah, and Eric, there's a question, I'm going to give this one to you similarly that came through that says, are there some best practices around turning your grassroots donors from a virtual campaign into recurring donors after the campaign ends? So I guess less about the amount, but more about getting those grassroots donors to become recurring donors.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the most important thing is just for an organization to have confidence. And this is a point that I think Brandon made earlier today, that, you know, if you have a grassroots donor who is willing to show up to your event, or, you know, log on to Zoom for your virtual campaign and spend $50, $100, you know, $1,000 at that event, that's someone that's, you know, presumably you can have a high degree of confidence is going to be absolutely excited about and comfortable with the idea of donating $5 to $10 to $20 a month to your cause. So it's, you know, one of the other things we mentioned is that, you know, we know that most donors are comfortable giving multiple times a year as opposed to just once. So I think you just need to give them that entry point, and that's the exciting thing about, you know, integrating a recurring giving feature into some of your other campaigns, is that you have a lot of donors that are really hungry to support your organization. You know, they're demonstrating that they're willing to give at a higher price point, you know, once or twice a year at your signature events. And so you just need to give them the door to walk through to give a small amount on a monthly basis. So I think just confidence is the most important thing.
Yeah, that is true. I just want to add something that one of our school partners, you know, emailed me. the other day, and she said, she was like, they were kind of going back and forth. It's hard to ask for donations during this time, but she was like, what, the reality is that our needs, what we need to raise money for hasn't changed and still exists. So it's totally okay to keep asking people, and basically the same thing, like stay confident in what you're asking from people. Okay, so I just wanted to add that in there. But one last question, Ian, this is for you. In what ways can you tie your overhead costs with giving campaigns? So how do you leverage donors to want to give to things like rent, utilities, etc.?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think this is one of the ways nonprofits can kind of help peel back the curtain to their donors, because as we're all aware, nonprofits have a lot of just, monthly expenses. We received an email last night from a summer camp that we help support, and they're getting pinched right now because all of their event funding is dried up. The summer is looking a little bit dicey for campers and things like that, and so they kind of laid out, here's our budget, here's what we need to do for payroll, here's what we need to do for facilities, here's what we need to do for utilities, things like that. And I think sort of being able to sort of draw a direct parallel between the overhead costs that an organization has and sort of the impact that, monthly giving can have on the organization is really important to donors. For planning purposes, it's money, an organization can count on. They can help budget against it. That can make, the future a little bit more stable. It can make, projects a little more achievable. And so being able to, like we talked about earlier, being able to sort of, pull the curtain back for donors, show where the money is going, show how it's, helping the org, either achieve their mission, or, sort of in times like this, help an org remain solvent so that the constituents who, like Eric pointed out, and as Kelsey, you did too, they're still out there. The need for these services hasn't gone away yet. And recurring donors are just sort of another way for an org to feel a little bit more stability at a time like this.
Totally.
And just to add to that,
well,
Ian, it's a really great point. When you look at this, treat it as a keep the lights on fund. You should be looking at, what do I need to do if I'm only getting minimal donations? Communicate with your donors and say, this is our need right now, and fulfill this need. And it doesn't have to be utilities or necessarily rent, but it can be, we can't, I'm going to use the camp example because that's what triggered the idea, but we can't have lunches for all the campers unless we get this amount per month, and then start a lunch support fund of part of your monthly giving and promote it that way, because that's a way to, one, differentiate what they're doing. And you're often going to get donors that will jump in on a second monthly giving campaign when it's something appealing. Some people get really excited about specific things that are tied to your cause. So don't be afraid to have several options, or the same thing. It's all monthly giving, but it's themed to what your needs are or what the appeal to the donor is. So that triggered an idea there that I just had to jump in and share.
Yeah, no worries. All right, well, thank you to everybody who asked questions today. I know there are some we didn't get to, so don't worry, we are rounding those up and we will get back to you individually. And just one last note, we do have 2 more webinars coming up this week in case you are interested. We'll send out further details and registration in our follow-up email this evening. The recording to today's webinar will also be in there. And stay tuned for our May webinar, which will be focused around communicating with your donors. So huge thank you to Eric and Ian and Brandon for joining today, as well as thank you to all of you for joining, and have a great rest of the day.
Thanks so much, Kelsey.
Thanks, everyone.